Hello and welcome to Inside ETFs. I'm Ramzan Karmali. Today we're looking at semiconductor ETFs and my guest is Steve Sosnick, Chief Strategist at Interactive Brokers. There are over 500 ETFs that contain Nvidia. No surprise why, as the third largest constituent of the S&P 500, it recently reported a 262% rise in quarterly revenue that has helped propel Nvidia into the mega-cap club, and with it electrify other chip stocks globally. There are many pure-play semiconductor indices. The most widely tracked is the Philadelphia Semiconductor Index, which is 13% Nvidia and is up about a quarter year to date. But Nvidia is only one player in a rapidly expanding space, and even the largest chip-related ETFs have differing strategies. So how to choose between the funds out there? Well, to help answer that and a lot more, I'm joined by Steve Sosnick from Interactive Brokers. Steve, thanks so much for joining us. Well, the largest semiconductor fund out there is the Van Eck one, SMH. Around a fifth of that is made up of Nvidia. How does that compare to the iShares fund, SOXX, which tracks the Philadelphia Semiconductor Index?
SMH is very top heavy. SMH is, call it a fifth Nvidia. Then you've got Taiwan Semi, which is about an eighth of it. Qualcomm. Qualcomm and Texas Instruments, another 5%. So right there, we've talked about, the lion's share of the index. It's very narrow in the sense that you've got some very strong, winning stocks in there, but you may want a bit more diversification, quite frankly. As I look at SOX, SOXX, we've got Nvidia about 9 or 10%, Broadcom about 8%, Qualcomm about 7.5%, and AMD 6%. You can see where I'm going with that. So you're talking about a much more diversified look at the major semiconductor stocks. So it's really a matter of taste. I mean, if you want to just pile on with a heavy emphasis on Nvidia, go ahead. Although I will argue that the whole semiconductor sector has a very heavy emphasis on Nvidia. As we saw, after their earnings, most of the rest of the semiconductor stocks rallied too in its wake. I think the value of ETFs tends to be that it allows easy diversification amongst even your sectoral choices. So I tend to favor the ones that are a little more diversified, but this is really, it's a matter of personal preference when it comes down to it.
And Steve, SPDR's XSD seems to ignore all the big names. Is that a wise move?
It's analogous basically to saying, should I be investing in the Russell 2000 or the S&P 500? XSD gives you access to a whole bunch of smaller, potentially up and coming names. All the big names that we've been discussing, how to start somewhere. And so it really becomes your, that's your entree into looking at some of the, maybe let's call them underappreciated names. When you're dealing with small caps, some of them are underappreciated for a reason. Some of them are diamonds in the rough. And in many ways, an ETF is a good way to expose yourself to that. One of my contentions about AI in general, a lot of the AI enthusiasm that we're seeing, somewhat reminiscent, history rhymes, but it doesn't repeat. It's reminiscent of the internet era. When there was a big rush into all things internet, we're getting that rush into all things AI. Bear in mind that the companies that people thought would be winners in 1999 and 2000, most of them were not. Amazon was, the rest of them weren't.
And Steve, to put you on the spot though, out of all the ETFs in the semiconductor space, which one do you like and which one don't you like at the moment?
Well, I'm not really supposed to do outright recommendations, so let me couch it a little bit differently. I can't do one or the other, so I'm just going to basically say, think about the different flavors of ETFs that you get. If you want exposure to the big boys, if you want the volatility that can arise with that, that's when you go into SMH. And you can use that as a proxy. Almost as a proxy for the NASDAQ 100 because the semiconductors are doing so much of the driving of the NASDAQ 100. On the flip side, I like the idea of FTXL if you want some more exposure, broad-based, and some exposure to the manufacturers. It's got a little bit more of a weighting in that regard. I'm not in love with small caps overall, which is why I'm not going to come out and say I love XSD. But in general, if you're a believer in looking for the diamonds in the rough, that's where you look, is XSD.
Steve Sosnick from Interactive Brokers, many thanks for your thoughts. And that is your look at semiconductor ETFs. I'm Ramzan Karmali, and this is Reuters.